Everybody, and welcome to our roundtable on 4 ways identity governance and administration improves your business. And to that I say, what? It actually improves your business? I mean, come on, identity governance and administration is, it's big, it's complex. How do you make it work to actually get real business value out of it? Well, we have expert panelists today who are going to prove that you can do it. And I, for one, am really looking forward to this. Today, we're very fortunate that we have Hanno Ekdahl from Idenhaus. He's the founder and CEO. Also from Idenhaus, we have Jerry Combs, who's the principal architect at Idenhaus. And in addition, from Cybersecurity, we have the chief security strategist, Rob Arago. I'm John Idenhaus. I'm with Climb Channel Solutions. We're the distribution partner for Cybersecurity and Idenhaus. Before we get started in talking about the discussion topics, what I'd like to do is just call out a couple of things on the platform. First, there are some assets that you can download. There's a lot of rich information that comes from Idenhaus and Cybersecurity. I urge you to download as much as you want. And in fact, if you are so moved that you would like to get an appointment with someone from Idenhaus, there's a little link there where you can get that set up for you. So please go ahead, take a look at that. You might also notice that with the platform, you can expand and shrink the windows as big and small as you want. So you can zoom in on some of the good information that we have here. So without further ado, let's get into the roundtable topics. So yeah, we're going to talk about the 4 ways that identity governance administration improves your business. But first, we're going to do a level set on what identity governance and administration is all about and what we really are talking about when we discuss IGA. And then from there, we'll talk about how it improves your business in 4 ways. And one of the ways is help desk ticket numbers go down. And if you could get help desk ticket numbers to go down, you're going to save some money and you're going to make people's lives a lot better. A second way is onboarding and role changes go easier. The provisioning of new people when they come on and you get them access to the systems they need. And then you deprovision and reprovision as they go through their life cycle. That goes a lot easier. And that automation and process improvement is a big business benefit. And then compliance costs go down. One of the big reasons why a lot of organizations put identity governance administration schemes into place is they need to do so for compliance. But you want to lower those costs because, let's face it, compliance is a cost drag. So you get lower costs and fewer resources needed for provisioning and governance if you have IGA in place. And you also get lower costs for access control. And then finally, the 4th reason is you get lower costs by visibility and control of software licenses. You actually can manage the assets that you have and tune it so you're only using the licenses that you need for other software systems you have in place. At the end, we'll talk about how you can get started with an identity and access management roadmap, and we'll leave some time for Q&A. So, Hanno, let me pass it on to you. Can you give us a little level set on IGA?
Sure thing, John. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. I always like to start off these conversations talking about the concept of what identity management is, and how that universe comes together, right? So how do we establish an identity for someone? What does that mean? Identity can be internal users, right? Our employees, our contractors, or it could be external users, our customers. What we need initially is authoritative sources where we have good data on our workers. We know who they are. We have enough information on them to understand what their affiliation is with the organization, which will help us define rules and roles. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation. It also allows us to define policies against who they are, which determine what they can and cannot do in our systems, what data they have access to, and it also allows us to personalize the content and the experience that they receive. So I don't know, Jerry, if you have anything you want to add to what I just said?
No, actually, I'm good right now, Hanno. Thank you.
Good. No, that's all right. I just I want to give you a chance to chime in if you had additional thoughts.
No,
and so
one
final thought.
I'm going to present here in a moment.
I know. Okay. One final thought is, after establishing that identity, we then have connectors that allow us to provision users into and out of systems, whether those are our cloud environments, databases they need access to, applications they need access to, and it gives us a centralized place to control everything. So that gets us into the digital identity lifecycle, which is really what we're trying to manage here, right? So some processes cost us money and some processes can make us money. So why don't we turn this one into a bit of a moneymaker here, right? So there's a lot of inefficiency, and money that we save by driving new levels of efficiency in our onboarding and provisioning processes is money the company saves and can spend somewhere else. There's a huge amount of friction in managing the digital identity lifecycle. If you think about all the things that have to come together, your first day of work, the first time you ever showed up at your company, did you have your computer? Did you have an office space assigned? Was your credit card assigned? Did you have a phone number? What were all the assets that you needed, and were they all available on day one? And most importantly, did you have all the access you needed to be productive? Most of the time, the answer to that question is no. And the reason is because there's so much localized administration, so many individual disparate systems that are not connected in any meaningful way. And identity management offers us a way to centrally manage those systems, to create a central user identity off the HR feed, if it's an employee, and then provision them into all the systems they need based on business rules in a very efficient manner. Moreover, as you change your access because you've gotten a promotion, you've moved departments, your role has changed in some way, we can automatically make those updates. We can provide centralized workflows that give you more control of your user experience. And when that person separates from the organization, we can remove all the access and know that we've closed all the security holes.
It's really about reducing the cost of change, because every one of those events, whether you're hiring a new person, terminating someone, changing their access to a system, bringing a new system online, every one of those require changes that have to happen in your environment and in your systems. And good identity management, good automation can drive down the cost of that change, make things easier, quicker, and smoother.
Yeah, and as another follow-on to that, I'd say, we want to take as many people out of this process as we can. Administering access into systems is really a low value added activity, and we could better use our IT people elsewhere.
Absolutely.
So the theme here is really about centralized control, right? So business process automation. Can I request access to a system and get that fulfilled and get that access on my own? Do I have a manager that I know about in the system who can approve my travel reports or expense reports, for example? So I have an expense report. I can feed our business process solutions with identity data that allows us to automate them, create escalation rules, and make sure things run smoothly. It gives me one place to aggregate my data on the user and one place to establish and administer policies so that things happen consistently across all systems. So instead of having a person to manage system A, B, and C, I have one place to manage everything in the identity vault, and then we can enforce those policies in all connected systems. We can report against them. We have ultimate visibility. We have ultimate control, and we can also provide a superlative user experience. Not to mention taking the people and the cost out of identity management and access management.
Excellent. Jerry or Rob, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say, I think, Hanno, you're hitting some very key points. Like when a organization is looking at the identity program, right, there's different elements that you've already brought up, which is if there's opportunities to be able to better automate these activities, right, then we are able to bring our people back in and up-level them to doing much more specific areas of focus for that. They're going to drive even better value back into the business. And then the other aspect, and I know it's going to delve into more of what you and Jerry are going to cover into the specifics of the 4 ways, is all about the cost savings. And to me, a big aspect of the cost savings is to take those dollars that you're taking back from the efficiencies you're implementing here and being able to put them back into other parts of the identity program, hopefully, right? But in general, the program from an IT and a cybersecurity perspective as a whole. So I think it's a great aspect of really understanding that those are some key outcomes organizations can benefit.
Right. And I think it's also important to look at the three circles that make up this diagram and to realize you really have to have all three, and you have to have the right balance of all three. And in many organizations, one of these gets shortchanged. And without having good data, without having well-defined policies, and without implementing good automation, you really can end up in a situation where your IAM program is failing and not meeting its goals. So you really have to make sure you have all of those. And it goes beyond the technology that's underneath. You need great technology to do automation, but you also need great technology and great process for getting the data where it needs to be. You need to have policies in place that support those business processes and support the quality of that data.
So in other words, the organizations doing this need to have the expertise to do these things or know where to get the expertise to do
Absolutely.
Well, I think building off what Jerry was saying there, the big value in identity management is tying the IT solution back to the business value you're trying to deliver, right? We want people to have the right access faster so they can be more productive. We want people to have self-service so they don't have bottlenecks and they don't get stuck somewhere and they're unproductive, right? We want to provide our customers better access to what they need in order to buy more services or buy more products from us. That's all supported. Those business outcomes are all supported by identity management if it's done right.
Wonderful. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's proof. As you improve your IGA best practices, it's clear there are positive business outcomes.
Where's the hockey stick growth, John? There should be hockey stick growth again.
Yeah.
The geometric.
You need the parabolic curve. I know. This obviously is meant to inject a little bit of humor, but now let's get into the four topics. And Jerry, what I'm going to do is pass it on to you to start out. How in the world do help desk tickets, how do the numbers actually go down if I implement an IGA program?
Well, this kind of goes back to what we were saying about the cost of change. People call the help desk because they need something to change. They need access added. They need to change a password. They need something to happen in the environment. And if the more of those things that can happen automatically based on policy, or that can happen in a self-service way, the fewer interactions that person needs to have with the help desk or even the ticketing system and online system. And it's not just the ability to make the request and do things automatically, it's also the visibility into what they can ask for and how they can ask for it. So it's all about driving down the cost of change and making it easier for those individual people, whether it's a customer or an employee, to request and make that change themselves, to initiate it in an automated way, and reducing the number of people that have to be involved, the time it takes, and the resistance it takes. So all of that helps drive down the volume and the length of each request and improves the overall efficiency of the organization.
Yeah, and I think for the people on the call, you take the number of users in your organization and take these statistics, and you can do the math for yourself, and it adds up to a significant amount of money pretty fast, especially when you consider that they say somewhere between a third and half of your employees are forgetting their passwords every 30 to 60 days.
Right. And this doesn't even account for the indirect costs. How much is that person's time is being wasted because
that's right.
They have to, take 40 minutes to get through a password reset with the help desk, or get themselves added to a group, or they can't do the things they need to do. So driving those indirect costs down is also a big part of this.
I think you just hit a key point there, Jerry, that we didn't really talk about yet, which is actually the experience. So there's the experience from the internal employee aspect of it, but there's also that customer and client side of it too, right? So again, as we're engaging with different portals, service portals, retailers, any of that self-service reset, that again, streamlining of that process and continuing to engage and keep me, for example, as a consumer on the site to actually go and make the purchase I planned on doing, right? There's that outcome that kind of ties back into that as well. The experience that equates to, again, still keeping them as a customer for that particular transaction, if you will.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now the next topic is, or the next way to improve is provisioning, the onboarding and the role change administration goes easier. Hanno, can I lead this to you to start off with, to talk about how we help here?
Well, I'll let you lean on me one more time here, John. So actually, this is one of my favorite slides. So, frictionless employee onboarding. When we go and think back on the diagram we looked at before with those three intersecting circles, right? We have data as sort of one of the foundational elements, automation as another piece, and this brings all that together. Whoop, yep, there you go. Thank you. And then policies, which is the business rules around it that determine what we do and do not do within our connectors. So if we look at rule-based provisioning, this tends to be the more simple form of provisioning. It's something I like to think of it primarily as birthright access is the way I start thinking about it. So if we think about just user classes in broad brush strokes, right? We have employees, we have contractors, we might have different customers in different segments. Everyone who's from an employee gets, an Active Directory account, they get an email account, they get access to the timekeeping system, they get access to the expense system, and they get access to whatever reports they need, right? Table stakes, everyone gets it. So I know you're an employee, therefore you get all this system access. We automatically grant it. No one has to touch it. It's all provisioned very simply, very automatically. It's a great way to take a lot of people out of your process and simplify your environment and dramatically improve the end user experience because those things all happen within a few minutes of the identity being created. In situations where someone needs additional access, Jerry was talking a bit about self-service tools around password resets, as well as being able to request applications. So if I can go request an application through a central workflow in my identity management solution, it may or may not require any kind of approval. If it doesn't require approval, then the system can automatically fulfill it because it's a low-risk application. So guess what? I need access to A. I request access to A. The system grants it, and I have it in minutes. I didn't have to call anyone. I didn't have to wait. It wasn't frustrating. It was simple and self-fulfilled. If it does require an approval, it gets routed to my manager. They can approve it, and then we can auto-fulfill it after it's been approved, right? So we have the ability to customize and control our requests based on the sensitivity of the application, but we're providing a better service level. We're doing it more efficiently, and it's auditable, which also helps meet our compliance and audit needs. And last but not least is role-based access control, which is sort of the holy grail of access. But once I understand your relationship with the organization, your job function, your job family, and some other attributes, I can now grant not only those birthright level access that everyone gets, I can tailor the applications that you have access to based on your job function in the organization. You're an accountant, therefore you need access to these accounting systems and reporting systems that all accountants who are an accountant 1 needs, right? I get promoted to accountant 2, I get that role. Maybe I lose some access that I no longer need because I'm an accountant 2. And so it enforces concepts like least privilege. It helps with things like segregation of duties, and it's all built into the system. No one's having to look at it. No one's having to tease out what the rules are. It's all automatically enforced.
Okay. It's important to point out that there's not one of these that's preferable or better than the others. Every organization needs to find their own balance of rule-based, request-based, and role-based. And that really depends on the complexity of the organization, how well defined the roles are, what their security requirements are. And for each organization, finding that proper balance is key. And it's important not to try to force one method or another. If you try to force everything to be role-based, you're going to end up spending extra money and effort you probably didn't need to spend. So balance is key.
Well, I would build up.
Hanno and Jerry, question for you both, if you don't mind on this. Like, when I look at it, the frictionless employee onboarding, and then, as you mentioned, Hanno, changing roles. One of the things I want to ask you both is HR plays a role, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How much, though, do you see that, for the audience as an example, probably more so on the identity front, so maybe some security, maybe some IT, but again, more technology-focused probably people, I would think, right now in the audience. How much do you see of an opportunity for their engagement with HR at the table, not just for the efficiencies and what HR wants out of it as well, right? But also helping fund the actual program and better evolve the program to where we all really want to be able to go, kind of the holy grail, if you will. What do you see in kind of that interaction and how important that is with HR?
So do you want me to take that one, Jerry?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So did a project recently for a large global organization, and HR had some very well-defined incentives for improving employee retention and providing a better onboarding experience. And that onboarding was not purely IT systems. That's the way we tend to think of it. But the onboarding meaning everything. They get your benefits. They make you feel welcome. And one of the things they found is that when people show up and their computer's not available and they don't have access, they don't really feel very well taken care of. And it actually drives much better employee retention to have a seamless, smooth onboarding experience. And so HR had a huge incentive. And so what they wanted to do was partner with HR, and they did fund some of these programs because they wanted to integrate with the asset provisioning to get the asset there on time. They wanted to make sure that you had all the access you needed because it drove probably half of your customer satisfaction with your onboarding experience. Now, the other interesting thing that came out of that exercise too was they actually had reporting requirements for EEOC that made them also want to improve their data quality, which helped IDM, but it also helped them as well. So it was interesting to dive into the data and realize that we both had a vested interest in improving the data quality just from two different perspectives.
Great example. Yep.
Right. Thank you. So we got two ways that your business improves so far with the help desk and with provisioning. Now here's the third way. Compliance costs go down. And part one of this story is we get lower costs and fewer resources for provisioning and governance. Jerry, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. So every business process is based on identity and requires identity data about who has access to what they can do, what access they have. So by automating those processes, we can lower the cost of changes. We can optimize the access people have. Really, it's all about lowering those costs by making the process as efficient as possible. And at the same time, you're reducing the cost for proving compliance because you're following an automated process that's well documented, that has a complete audit record, and that can be shown to work consistently every time. And so the less variation you have in the process, the more automated enforcement you have, the less compliance costs you have.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, Jerry. The fact that we historically in IT have managed a lot of these things locally, right, in individual systems or on an individual platform, and now we have the ability to do it centrally. It just gives us a level of scale and control that we just didn't have previously.
Interesting, very interesting. And part two to this compliance costs goes down point is there's lower costs for access control. Hanno, do you want to go through this one?
Yeah, actually, this is also another one of my favorite diagrams. So I just love the math behind this about how it simplifies, right? So if we manage individual users against individual systems and we have a many-to-many relationship, the complexity of managing that just from an overhead perspective is pretty obvious, right? And so you have N times M total number of assignments. It's a geometric progression and it gets very ugly very fast. Whereas if you have a role in the middle and I assign a user to a role and then I manage all the permissions on the back end, it's much simpler to get people into the right level of access that they need, right? And that helps us enforce things like least privilege. So if we think about it from a compliance standpoint, where we have our auditors come in, we have to prove to them that you have the right access that you're supposed to have. You don't have extraneous access, or that if you do have access to something, we have a way to attest to that. Roles go a long way to getting you out of the evidence game, where you don't have to go reach out to all your systems, consume all the logs, look at all the user stores and say, okay, here's what Hanno has access to, and here's why. It's like, well, Hanno is accountant one, therefore he's in this role, and because he's in this role, he has this access. That's it, end of story. I don't have to prove anything else. The business logic within our system is the reason why I have the access, and that is acceptable to our auditors. I don't have to provide anything beyond that, right? My access is very well defined. It's clearly documented in the rule set that assigns me to the role. So the nice thing about that is also it's eminently scalable. As my role changes in the organization, the new role is applied, the old role is removed, and it's all demonstrable through the business rules that are coded into the system that my access is correct. It goes on, number one, it reduces the administration of ensuring that it's correct, and it reduces the cost of compliance because I don't have any additional evidence to provide my auditors.
Exactly. All the compliance effort goes into showing that the role has the right access. And that's a much simpler process than showing that every single user has the right individual access.
Yes, and going forward as well, if the permissions for my role should change, then I update the role to add the new permission, remove the old permission, whatever those tweaks or adjustments are, and then it applies to all the users automatically. So now I just have to change one thing, the role, and then it changes everyone's access instead of having to go to each individual user and update their access.
I think Hanno and Jerry, the other thing that we're seeing in this realm that's extended now, you talk about the compliance aspect of it, but now you have the privacy regulations that are coming into play. And one of the three elements you talked about right in the three circles is the data aspect. And that data piece is now even more critical, where you're not only saying, hey, here are the specific details behind the roles and the type of access these roles have to the systems. Now it's also, what's the purpose of the actual access you have to even the data? Because from a privacy perspective, right, we need to answer those questions, whether it's something from GDPR, whether it's something here stateside in California, all the different states coming up with their own piece of it are driving back at that. Hey, what purpose in the first place do you even have for actually collecting the information and storing the information? And then the roles associated to who actually has access within your organization to the data, and provide the reasons why as an extension of that as well. I think that's another major area of opportunity, because we're seeing a lot of that privacy regulation start to come to fruition of people having to truly answer these questions, and we're going to see more of it go into actual execution mode with penalties in 2023. So not far out.
I think that's an excellent point, Rob. So, if I'm an organization looking to comply with GDPR or CCPA or any of the other new rules that are coming online, how do I then manage that? Well, I can start defining roles and other rules based on my identity data, and I can easily add or remove access to people using this framework, right? If I had to do it in a manual way and manage it locally, it would be impossible.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. And so here's another way compliance costs go down. And this one's interesting to me, that by having good identity governance and administration, we're actually driving up the visibility, but able to control the costs of software licenses. How does that work?
Well, in many cases, software licenses have been over-provisioned in the past just because it was so difficult to know who should have access and to give it to them when they need it, remove it when they no longer need it. Doing all that, there's a lot of overhead in managing that and in just assigning the license and removing the license. If we tie that into our provisioning system based on the data we have the ability to grant licenses only when they're needed for as long as they're needed, and to remove them when they're no longer needed. And so that allows us to take advantage of licensing models where we're not licensing every piece of software for every person in our organization, and especially for licenses that are very expensive, we're making sure we manage them individually for only the people that need it when they need it. It's a fantastic way to drive efficiency, but it's all enabled because we can change the access, change the license assignment quickly, easily, and cheaply.
Yeah, and building off what Jerry said, I mean, I've seen this so many times over the course of my career where, it's really guesswork. I think we need 1,000 licenses of X or 200 licenses of Y, and it turns out they don't, but they're still paying for those licenses because there's never an audit, there's never a true up, and it's just wasted money. Moreover, on the asset side, if we're not tracking your assets, let's say you're assigned a workstation, I don't have that linked to your identity in any way, a lot of those assets walk out the door. I had one customer that had figured out they had 7,000 workstations that had walked out the door, basically, that they had covered, because they just didn't know it until they went back, and did an audit like a year later. And then guess what? It's too late. The asset's gone. And that's a lot of money. This was a few years ago, but you think 7,000 laptops at an average cost of what, $2,000 a piece? How many millions of dollars is that? Seriously, I'm not even joking. That's a true story. It's like, it's crazy. But the money's just walking out the door. People are like, oh, guess what? I got laid off today. I got a free laptop. I quit. I got a free laptop. I'm just walking home with it. They never asked for it, right? So without visibility, we have no opportunity for control. And one of the things we can do off of this system as well is send out notifications. We can send out notifications to HR and the hiring manager saying, hey, Bob's last day is coming up. Please make sure you retrieve his security badge, his workstation. He's got 2, iPads as well. Depending on people's roles, they can have a collection of assets, especially in the IT organization where they're testing and working on a number of devices. And that has been eminently successful in closing those loopholes and keeping the assets in the company where they belong.
Because identity management is all about maintaining relationships. And the relationship between an employee and the assets, or customer and the assets, partner and assets, is just another aspect of identity management. So licenses, assets, access, it all ties back together to how do we maintain data about these relationships.
Well, and here's another wrinkle, because I was going through some old customer stuff as I was preparing for this, and I actually found an analysis we did a few years ago where we actually started managing leasing costs. So, if you think about a lot of organizations, they lease their photocopiers or they lease other devices that are on-prem, and there's like a buyout clause in the lease that says, oh, it costs for $1, you get to buy out the lease and own the equipment. But they wouldn't do that. They'd continue actually paying for a lease that they technically didn't owe on anymore because they didn't realize. And so we basically got our arms around their leases and drove a huge amount of savings by saying, okay, here's all your leases that are up. Buy the asset for $1, stop paying the leasing fee. Yep. So there's all sorts of creative ways you can tie identity management into your environment to help you manage costs and drive costs out of the business, eliminate waste, and also provide a better user experience.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is a new one for me, Hanno and Jerry. Like, this is a great side benefit, right? And it actually, as you guys are going through it, it makes all the sense in the world, but it also ties right back to what you guys were just covering, right? The onboarding process, the changing of roles and whatnot. So tracking all of these things, and yeah, that laptop actually stays with the company, right? Doesn't go at the door, not one of the 7,000. And then the role-based access control elements come into play as well, right? So, this person does have access to use this particular application. Therefore, yes, comp the license for them. Or no, let's pull it back into the pool and we're not out of compliance, if you will. Right, so they all intertwine, and this is just a great side benefit and a great opportunity also for, again, reducing the costs associated to everything that comes along for the ride with it. It's great.
Right. A lot of people get tunnel vision and think that identity is all about people. And people are only one aspect. There's lots of non-carbon entities that have identities. I had a customer that had ladders used on their service trucks. They were losing them like crazy. So they started tracking ladders of identity. Over the course of my career, we've done that with, film assets, so video clips for a large media company. We've done oil wells. All kinds of assets.
Cable boxes.
Cable boxes, that's true. Those as well. Managing identity of cable boxes. And those have a different scale and a different requirements than managing the identities of people and simple access that a lot of IT systems do. So to do that, you need really powerful, really scalable platforms. And so that's why we keep coming back to the platforms we use and back to Microfocus, is because of the ability to do that, to go beyond carbon-based life forms.
Jerry, that's the interesting thing too. Now I'm thinking all these different IoT devices. I'm thinking medical devices, right? All these things to be able to properly track and have all these associated.
There was a hospital system where we did infusion pumps, the identity of infusion pumps, and track those. So yeah, it's the applications have been numerous and interesting over the decades.
Airlines have used them actually to track their planes and track the maintenance on their planes as well.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Great use case.
That's remarkable. So you guys have shown us 4 ways between tickets, provisioning, compliance, and asset management. These are ways that your business actually improves with identity governance and administration. I can imagine somebody who's about to launch a project wherever they are on their current journey now has some additional fuel that they can take back to their business on why their business needs to improve their IGA to improve their business's stature. So how do people get started? Hanno, can you let us know?
Sure thing, John. One of the things that organizations sometimes struggle with is they recognize they have a need or they have a set of needs, but they have trouble setting a direction. So we like to come in and start off with a roadmap. So a strategy and roadmap assessment where we take stock of the current state, current architecture, current challenges, and then we propose and prioritize a set of initiatives that come out of stakeholder interviews and technical evaluations to lay out a program to methodically address the highest value opportunities in the organization. So the idea is let the business value drive the initiative selection process. And through that strong linkage, we can explicitly define a path forward that's going to add value to the business, solve key problems, demonstrate value, and build momentum for the program.
Yeah, I mean, every business has an unlimited list of things that they could do or that would provide some benefit. So the real key is doing the analysis needed to figure out what are the things that will provide the most benefit, what are the order we need to do them in, and what are the things that we don't do. Frankly, deciding what not to do is a huge part of developing an identity management strategy.
Wonderful. So I want to remind everybody that one of the downloads on the platform is set an appointment with someone from Idenhaus, and that's available. But of course, just looking at the page here, you'll see Hanno's and Jerry's email addresses. So please feel free to connect with them or with Rob and myself, and we'll be happy to get you going. And we do have a few questions, folks. So let's see. One of them, I think, Rob, you brought into the consumer identity and access management piece at some point, and one of the questions actually addresses this. How does this help for my digital storefront? If I have some sort of customer or patient or citizen facing portal, can this give my customers a better experience?
I think we answered that, kind of going through this, which is that's a key aspect of it, right? When you're dealing with the consumer side of it, it's about the experience. And to me, it's about the experience first, kind of as 1A, and 1B is the security elements, which is really kind of baked into the overarching experience, because it goes back to an example I was talking about, especially this time of year, if people are going through and a bunch of different online shopping and oops, I forgot my password, right? That password reset experience better be pretty straightforward, pretty timely, so that I'm not actually moving on and going somewhere else to make that purchase, right? So Hanno and Jerry, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on kind of the whole consumer aspect of it.
Well, I mean, consumer and citizen identity management is huge. I mean, we've done implementations for states, for countries, for municipalities, and providing an easier way for them to interact with their constituents and for those constituents to consume services and to get information. It's huge. And all of that is enabled by these same types of identity management processes and automation. There's variations compared to doing it for inside the enterprise, but hugely important. And it's all about ease of use and removing friction from the processes.
Yeah, I would echo those points as well. And I would also say that, we think about it from a share of customer wallet perspective. People are shopping in physical stores, they're shopping online. To the extent that we can understand and manage their identity across the physical as well as virtual locations. Let's say you have a stock out in a store and I know that you're in the store based on your mobile device, right? I can then say, oh, you want you're looking for a blue sweater in this size. It's not available. You can go on the app and I can provide it for you that way, right? So we're trying to fulfill as much of the customer needs as we can, right? And so if you think about them on their sales journey, whether it's physical or online, our ability to understand where they are, what they're looking for, and fulfill that need instead of them going to an alternate source to buy whatever it is they're shopping for, is a really huge opportunity that identity management can offer to really capture more of that customer wallet by providing a much better integrated experience across your sales channels.
That's a key thing, though, you're talking about, Hanno, which is the analytics behind the scenes. So people don't really kind of connect the dots to this with identity. And your example is spot on, where if it's physical, I'm in a store and they've got some GPS tracking because I'm using the Target app as an example, right? And all of a sudden, I'm moving out towards the doors going out. I've got a discount code that just popped up in my Target app when I was an alert on my phone, right? Or I'm online shopping and all of a sudden I've moved off the website. All of a sudden here comes an email with, hey, you want an extra 25% off back to the store online, right? So the analytics behind the scenes from that sales and marketing channel is critically important. It's so tightly integrated into the identity aspect of it all.
Right. And I would also add that's good. And that also triggered another thought for me, which is, you think about your CRM system. So now if we're able to feed that customer data from our IDM system into our CRM system, where we have more sophisticated tools there that we can leverage, then our identity and CRM are working together to provide a much better, more accurate picture of the customer, and also to take marketing and sales-based actions like the coupon that you mentioned. Part of that would be an integrated delivery between the CRM and IDM.
Interesting. Yes. And there's real business benefit there if you're improving the way you deliver your product to your customers through that customer identity and access management. Very cool stuff.
Absolutely. You want to be everywhere where your customer is, right?
Absolutely. Here's another one. You mentioned IoT devices and their identities. How do we streamline the MFA, multi-factor authentication process, for machines? Non-carbon-based life forms, Jerry.
Right. Well, MFA is probably the wrong way to look at it, but authentication authorization of machines and devices is key. And doing that requires knowing what they should have access to, when they should have access to it, and what are the credentials or authentication methods that we're using to authenticate. And all of that data has to be managed. And we also have to be able to provide the analysis of what are they accessing, when are they accessing, and doing the analytics so that we can manage the risk around those types of accesses as well.
So, Jerry, just kind of building off of that, would you say a certificate-based approach would be best for authenticating devices?
Actually, that's kind of legacy. Certificates are kind of the old way, but
so I'm old school. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, because PKI is actually, there's a reason we don't do PKI the way everybody thought we would all over the world. We use it for HTTPS, but it's expensive, it's complicated, it's got a lot of management overhead. And so there are other technologies, some of it based on PKI, that provide access to that. Yes, even that requires knowing who the parties are, what their credentials are, being able to validate their secrets and their authentication mechanisms, and being able to tie all that together. And there's a huge process in maintaining all that data. So that's where it kind of goes back to the IDM and the IGA processes and platforms. How do we maintain that? How do we keep it up to date? How do we automate it?
Wonderful. We've got another one here. You mentioned all this provisioning and automation, and a lot of that sounds like it's bleeding over into help desk tools, IT service management, enterprise service management, integrating with human resources and things like that. How do the tools that you guys recommend integrate with those kinds of existing service management tools?
Well, those tools are key parts of the business processes and the IT system processes. And so your platform and your data has to integrate with it. You have to be able to get data in and out and to be able to coordinate activities between them. As well, you've got to maintain inventories or catalogs of what access is available, what assets are available, and who's responsible for them. And each of those, there's a balance to be struck about what data you have where, what's appropriate for your IT management system, what's appropriate for your identity management system, what interfaces should be used in your service management system. And so there's a great complexity in figuring that out. And that's part of what we do when we do the road mapping and developing strategies, is looking at what are those systems that are available, what's their current state, what's the effort to implement that integration, and where does it make sense? And so it's key. You have to have platforms on each side that have great integration capabilities, great data management capabilities, and be able to get data in and out. We've done a lot of integrations between, for example, ServiceNow and Microfocus IDM, and the ability to provision not only users, but assets and data back and forth, and be able to have actions come from ServiceNow into the IDM system to drive change and to make requests and to validate that things have happened. I mean, all of that integration is critical.
Wonderful. And at the risk of sounding like a commercial, Microfocus also has service management products that they can offer and integrate into these things too. ServiceNow certainly is a fine one, but so is the SMAX product from Microfocus. Here's the last one. Frankly, I could do this all day long, but we got to end it somewhere. I think here's a great question to wrap it up. Here's a person who has several tools that fit into this identity governance space already, but they don't seem to be bringing them the benefits that we're talking about here today. Do you guys have a secret sauce? What can they do?
I'll let you take that one, Hanno.
So I think what we see is that organizations are using like AWS tools to manage their AWS environment, or tools within the Google Cloud platform, or they're using a localized tool that manages a certain domain, whether it's their AD environment or a certain platform. And so what happens is that you have one set of policies that are defined locally that are affecting some part of your infrastructure, but you still don't have that centralized view, and there may be a lack of consistency between your tools, right? So while you might believe that your policies are standardized, you might be implementing policy A here and policy B there, not doing it consistently across the systems. So the nice thing about identity management is, using connectors and some of the other functionalities and tools, we can actually integrate more deeply into these different environments and integrate with some of the local management tools as well, in order to provide that projection of policy, rules, data, and control in a disparate set of systems, right? So I really think people try to cobble together a set of localized tools and then pull the data out and the information out of those tools that they need, but there is no central way to manage them unless you integrate them with some identity management platform that then allows you that centralized control and one-stop shopping, if you will, to manage the data, the identity, and the policy.
Yeah, a big reason we see people who aren't getting what they expected or aren't getting what they'd like to get out of their implementations and their systems is they often start out very tactical. And they have a single problem or a single compliance issue, something the auditors are forcing them to do. They come up with a point solution for that. And then they do another point solution for something else, another point solution for something else. And so being able to pull all that together and say, is there a way we can solve all these problems with a consistent platform? Is there a way we can make this so that the next thing that comes up, there's a new requirement next month, new compliance issue the month after that we can simply extend what we're already doing, that we can adapt to be able to handle those new requirements and not relying on point solution after point solution. So, being able to have a bigger picture, a more strategic vision is critical.
And that's actually ties back into the whole concept of developing a roadmap, right? Is understanding the problem set from a business standpoint, the value we're trying to deliver, and thinking past the local point solution that's right in front of our face to something that's a bit more holistic and scalable and solves the broader problem.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Any final words, gentlemen?
Well, I wanted to thank you for the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's always nice to think back on different examples and customers you've worked with in the past and the problems you've solved, and to be able to share that knowledge. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to echo that. I mean, I look forward to doing this again. I'd love to talk to anybody else that's out there. If you've got a specific set of problems, a unique requirement, Hanno and I have been doing this a very long time. We'd love to hear what your issues are and see if we can possibly help you out.
Yeah, John, I appreciate, pulling us all together for this. And I think Hanno and Jerry, you guys took something that's rather complicated and made it pretty simple. And here's four points that people can kind of just take as examples. You told the stories behind it. I think they're very relevant, and they're actually things that can be made pretty simply actionable in these organizations to help move the needle for them in kind of a complex world in identity. So I think you did a really great job.
Thanks,
well
Rob.
said, Rob. Way to wrap it up. I love it. So thank you, Rob. Thank you so much, Rob Arago from CyberRes, and Hanno Ekdahl and Jerry Combs from Idenhaus. I think you really set out to do what we came to do, and thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who attended. You know how to get a hold of us. We've said it several times, so please get a hold of us if you have any interest whatsoever, and we'll be sure to follow up with you. And thank you, and that ends the roundtable. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.